So I put in the last spike for the E&N Railway, and it took me to someone's driveway, a numbered driveway, which it does happen with these old railways from time to time. So, yeah, no, I'm not doing that. We are driving through Courtenay right now. Gonna go to the old Courtenay train station. We'll go to Esquimalt too when we're in Victoria, and that is the beginning or the end, but this could also be the beginning or the end. It all depends where you start. It's rainy today, very rainy day. We're gonna go look at some of the trestles. Rail grade goes right through this area here, right here. That's the old station. So here we are, it's wet. Courtenay. This would have been the main station for Courtenay, a private property. Here, yeah. Via Rail, Canada, Courtenay. Welcome to the city of Courtenay. The Island Corridor Foundation, that's who runs it, but this is the track. You can see they got sidings. It ends right over there. Was going to get continued on to Campbell River, but they never continued it on. Windows are all smashed out. There is potential for this to be resurrected, turned back into a functional railway, but it'd take a lot of work. The railway in parts is buried or covered in some regions too, so it'd be a lot of work. But oh, it's raining, man. Holy. Just to give you an idea, camera's getting absolutely soaked. That's the water we're dealing with. That's the Courtenay train station. Just basically left it. They still got the old rail cars and everything here. You can see that's the line that goes right through Courtenay. Courtenay, the original line ran from Esquimalt, Victoria to Courtenay, terminated in Courtenay. It had spurs going out to Lake Cowichan near Duncan area. So this morning we started in Courtenay. It's been a really rainy, horrible day. 40 millimeters of rain. So about 1.5 inches of rain, which is a lot. The roads are covered in puddles, lots of hydroplaning. So we were going to check out a bunch of trestles. We didn't do that because a lot of them are drone access only, and I can't fly the drone in this when it's this bad. This weather's a little better, but up island it was really, really bad. So like torrential rain all day basically. We're driving towards a critical place though. Right now, the last spike for the railway was Cliffside. So if you were to follow Highway 1 kind of towards the left there, it would take you down the Malahat Summit. What we're going to do is we're still going to go down the Malahat Summit, but we're going to kind of move around the top of the summit to Cliffside, which is where the last spike for the Esquimalt Nanaimo Railway was driven before. They built spurs out to other regions later, to Cowichan for logging, and then Port Alberni for logging as well. Logging railways met with the railway, and then the Wellington Collieries Railway in Cumberland also kind of didn't really meet with the corridor, but it intersected and was part of the whole Union Bay thing. It was all linked together. It wasn't officially part of it, but it was still linked to it. The last spike in railway terminology is the railway spikes that when you drive the ties in to keep the rail, the sections of rail. The last spike is the very last spike for the ties that's pounded into the railway. So that basically means it's complete. There's also the McGee and the Kinsol trestles around here. One of them's been converted to like a walking trestle. These trestles are old enough that they're still made of wood, or been restored with wood to be historically accurate. Like Myron Canyon, for example, on the mainland near Kelowna, those all burned in fires, and then the Historical Preservation Society made a point of rebuilding them all in wood for the sake of the historical accuracy of it, as opposed to just building a bunch of trestles that were in the same location but didn't actually look anything like what would have been on the railway at the time. So Cliffside, BC is where we are heading. This is where the last spike was pounded in, a gold spike. Sir John A. Macdonald, the first Prime Minister of Canada, he was an important figure for our story because he really made a point of the railway, guys. 1871, Confederation of Canada, which was the joining of all the different regions, the territories and regions of Canada, into the Dominion of Canada. 1871, John A. Macdonald was preaching about this railway, saying, like, we need this railway. It's a part of the agreement because BC, British Columbia, initially agreed to join Canada if they would construct a transcontinental railway through British Columbia to other parts of Canada, because BC wanted to be joined with the rest of Canada by rail and have infrastructure so that they could actually be functional with the rest of the country. So one of the deals was that the government had to fund and build a railway across Canada, right? And I mentioned before about Sonora and Quadra Islands and how they initially wanted to have a hardline link with a bridge across the Gulf Islands, but that would have caused issues for shipping and stuff, so that never transpired. But that was John A. Macdonald. He wanted that in 1871. The railway didn't get built till 1884, so it was a little bit after his time, right after he got out of office. But he wanted this railway so badly, and he said it was a huge part of the agreement between Canada and British Columbia at the time, or the Dominion of Canada, but also just because it was super important for resource transportation, such as coal, because Vancouver Island is, geologically, it's different. It's part of the Rangelia terrain, whereas the other ones are more Stakenia, the Amanika terrain. It's like a grouping of geologic material on the Earth's crust that has a similar makeup, and so a series of terrains have crashed into the west coast of North America over many millions of years, like hundreds of millions of years kind of a thing. Alberta was like a tropical beachfront, like west coast part of Canada at one point, but then millions of years went by and the Rockies formed, and then the Columbia Mountains formed, and then the Cascades formed, and then the Coast Mountains formed, and then more time went by and they had volcanic eruptions in various places, and that's where you get those lava flows and the Thompson and up on the plateau, and then it filled in a bunch of these mountain ranges, and then, you know, we as humans came. I think it was about 10,000 years ago, they found some native artifacts from a settlement that had been out here. So 10,000 years out of like 200 million years we've been here, so we've only basically seen a few seconds or maybe like a couple minutes of geologic time. If all of geologic time was a day, for like scale, for example, we would have only seen about a few seconds to maybe like a couple minutes. The whole point in this is that Vancouver Island is the accretionary wedge of Cascadia subduction zone we're currently on top of. So an accretionary wedge is, as the oceanic plate subducts under the big North American plate, there's a bunch of sediment on the top of the plate that gets scraped off and it gets formed into a wedge. And what does Vancouver Island have? Well, it has a lot of sedimentary rock. Lots of limestone. That's why Vancouver Island has some of the highest concentration of caves in the world, especially underwater caves. Vancouver Island quite literally is the wedge. So underneath Vancouver Island, the entire Pacific Ocean is subducting under North America and basically creates volcanoes such as Mount Garibaldi and all the volcanoes going up into Stikine country and Alaska too. Vancouver Island is different, and this railway was a huge part of solidifying Vancouver Island as part of like Canada, and because it was initially going to become part of the States as well. So I put in the last spike for the ENN railway, and it took me to someone's driveway, a numbered driveway, which it does happen with these old railways from time to time. So yeah, no, I'm not doing that. So we're not going to go to the last spike. This area that we're in right now, we're driving through Cliffside. This was where the last spike was driven. John A. Macdonald, 1886. It was a spike made of gold. John A. Macdonald, first Prime Minister of Canada. He was the one that drove the spike in. And it marked the completion of the railway from Esquimalt to Nanaimo. Not necessarily to Victoria or Courtenay or Cowichan, but basically just from Esquimalt to Nanaimo. That was the original route. They built a subdivision for Victoria, they built a subdivision for Courtenay, and they built a subdivision for Port Alberni after that, the big junction in Parksville that I showed you guys. But this was where the first beginning of it started. Obviously, there's multiple last spikes on a railway, depending on the subdivision that you're talking about. But in this particular case, this region, Cliffside, was the last spike. Okay, guys, here we are. Kinsol trestle, one click that way. So this would be the old rail grade, the ENN, the Esquimalt Nanaimo Railway. So you follow this down a kilometer and reach the trestle. So let's take a look here. Historic Kinsol trestle. The Kusila River Bridge, more commonly known as the Kinsol Trestle, is one of several trestles along the abandoned Canadian National Line of Vancouver Island. The name Kinsol derives from the King Solomon copper mine that operated briefly in the area. The railways helped to build the economy of Vancouver Island, and at the turn of the 20th century, construction of railways drove British Columbia's economy through the extraction of seemingly endless resources, especially the harvest of timber from the dense forests of Vancouver Island. The Canadian Northern Pacific Railway, CNPR, began work on the Vancouver Island line on February 18, 1911. Its ambitious owner, Sir William Mackenzie and Sir Donald Mann, were soon debt-ridden, and the line was taken over in federally owned Canadian National Railway. Although CN resumed construction in 1918, the railway had been downgraded in importance from a main line to a logging railway. This is what some of the old trestles looked like. A carpenter carved a unique number into each post of a timber, and the builders used the numbers to identify its position in the trestle. Work began on the Kinsol trestle in 1914, but stopped at the onset of World War I. The Kinsol trestle was completed in February 1920. The original design featured a high-level cow truss that was supported on timber towers. When they talk about bents, they're talking about a row of piles to support the bridge. So each one of these would be a bent. One here, one here. There's a lot of bents. Bent of piles, as they call it. So we are in Nanaimo. We're in the museum. Nanaimo on Vancouver Island, big ferry terminal for coming from Vancouver to Vancouver Island. So you leave Vancouver, Horseshoe Bay. We're gonna talk a little bit about Nanaimo history. Nanaimo had a huge coal mining industry. As you can see here, when coal was king, Robert Dunsmuir, infamous in Nanaimo. Nanaimo thrived for nearly a century on 3 coal-laden seams located beneath the city: Douglas, Newcastle, and Wellington. Sloping mine entrances and deep shafts led to tunnels penetrating coal seams over 500 meters below sea level. Coal shaped Nanaimo into a tight community that worked hard, conditioned by frequent mine tragedies. There was a lot of accidents in Nanaimo. Nanaimo had very unfortunate history with coal and coal mining explosions. There was a lot of the mines in Nanaimo. Instead of using Davy lamps, the safety lamps, the coal mine safety lamps, they used just normal miners' lamps that had a spark, and so that spark would have a tendency to ignite the coal fumes and coal dust, which caused explosions, which usually ended up killing quite a bit of miners. So Nanaimo has a dark history of that. 3 main coal fields would be the Newcastle, Douglas, and Wellington. Lots of logging in Nanaimo too. Nanaimo is famous for its sawmills. The Harmac site. So this would have been the mill, and then that would have been all the wood, the finished product, similar to Port Alberni Mill that we saw. Lots of mills. Vancouver Island's known for its milling. The decline of coal mining coincided with new logging and sawmilling opportunities in the early 1940s. Men and machines were dispatched to the Nanaimo Lakes area south of the city. As trucks were unavailable during the World War II, locomotives hauled the big logs to the dumping area. H.R. McMillan's announcement that Nanaimo was chosen as the ideal site for a pulp mill was welcome news. Not only would there be several hundred construction jobs, but the mill's good wages attracted skilled workers and their families to the community. For the first time in many decades, Nanaimo experienced the security of a stable employer and regular paychecks. Around the harbor and at the Harmac pulp mill, sawmills were springing up. Logs were hauled by a new generation of trucks that carried heavier loads. Demand for BC lumber from around the world created a feeling of unlimited opportunity. Sawmill waste was transported to Harmac for use as the raw material for pulp and boiler fuel. While the forestry industry has recently experienced a slowdown, logging, sawmilling, and pulp mill manufacturing still remain as important economic activities. It's a huge part of Vancouver Island history and Vancouver Island as a whole, even today, because this wood isn't very good, guys. It's not, for building houses and stuff, that's not the kind of wood you want to use. You want to use trees of a certain age. These trees are too old. This gives you kind of a good idea of everything going on. So you can see some of the, look at the pictures here. So the draw works for the donkey. And then we got logging trucks. Those would have been 40s power wagons. The yarder, we saw that in the McMillan Mill, H.R. McMillan in Port Alberni. That's the yarder. So these lines, it stayed with guy wires to keep the main pole up, basically. And then there's a series of cables that go out, and a block rides on the cables, and they basically use that to pick wood out of the bush. So that's a mobile yarder. There's the donkey. That's what they call a donkey. Steam donkey engine. Oh, this is a sled with a donkey on it. So the sled would usually, what they would do is they'd cut wood, they'd cut a log in half, and then they'd use each half of the log for 2 sleighs, kind of like skis, and then they'd mount a genset, like, or power pack with steam donkey, basically onto the sled, and they put a frame at the front and haul it around the bush and use that for logging. Choking, that's one of the loggers choking up the wood on the cut there that they got. Big chainsaws, using those chainsaws is hard work. Big chainsaw. This is a lost art, being a saw filer nowadays. This guy's basically checking the sawtooth in the mill, making sure that everything's good. Here you can see they got log booms here, so this is how they store all their material when it's out in the bay waiting to be processed. And then you can see they got the yard here where they're storing all their material, cutting everything into dimensional lumber or even rough cut lumber. So it's weird. Rough cut lumber is like true 3" by 3", and then dimensional lumber is 3.5 by 1.5, right? 2x4 is not actually 2x4. That looks like rough cut lumber. She's measuring it out there. That's a dozer boat. That's what they call a dozer boat. He's got a PV there. Is that a PV or a cant hook? One or the other. Most likely a PV, probably. Cant hook's wouldn't be as useful for that particular application. But you could still use a cant hook. Cant hook is basically the same as a PV, but a PV's got a point on the bottom, and the point allows you to get into the logs more. So this is all just general Nanaimo stuff. Any of you island people, you might know some of this stuff. See all the cool pictures of Nanaimo, what it used to look like, little artifacts, Chinatown. Very interesting though. Nanaimo, the hub city. Today, Nanaimo is known as the harbor city, but Nanaimo used to be the hub city, referring to downtown's distinctive fan-shaped street pattern reminiscent of the spokes of a hub of a wheel. It's laid out radially, so the streets all go out from a circle, like a radial layout. See how it goes like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, kind of in a fan. So the harbor is here, right? This is downtown. Everything's centralized in the harbor. The idea behind this radial layout was that when the coal mines were coming through, they wanted the fastest, most direct route. And because the way the mines were all dispersed around Nanaimo, the radial system for building road was the best way they could economically and efficiently get the coal to market, because they needed to get the coal to the ships so that they could export the coal mainly to other parts of British Columbia, because Nanaimo coal was very famous around the world, and in particular in the States and in parts of Canada, because it was known for its really high burning temperature, and it was long lasting. It was just pure, really good solid coal. And so Nanaimo had a huge thing jump out of that, where their whole city was laid out radially, so that no matter which way the mine came from, there was a straight chute down to the harbor. You don't usually see the radial layout too much anymore. When Nanaimo was first starting to flourish as a coal mining community, that's when they built it. Coal mining in Nanaimo is very important. #1 mine, 1937, Nanaimo. So this is one of the coal mines. Steam whistle used in #1 coal mine originated in the 1880s. The whistle was used to signal the men to and from the work, mine emergencies, and the city curfew. So that's the Davis safety lamp that I was talking about that you use in a coal mine. You don't use an acetylene lamp, the carbide lamps that would have a bit of water dripped onto carbide that would create acetylene gas. You don't do that. You use special lamps in coal mines. That's the lamp you want to use. You can see just basically similar mine setup. So they said that Nanaimo, the coal seams actually go under Nanaimo. So similar to Merritt. So this is all underneath the sound. The Douglas seam, the Nanaimo #1 Esplanade seam. There's a huge shaft that goes down 730 feet. And then there's all of these workings are below. Just in Nanaimo itself, tons of coal deposits. Really fascinating Nanaimo, frankly. That's going to be it for me for tonight. I hope you enjoyed it. All the history of the ENN Railway, all about Courtenay, Parksville, the whole show there. It's been 2 days of kind of driving around, looking at trestles, old train stations. We got a few more. We're going to check out the station in Esquimalt and some other little things along the way. So if you like this kind of content, make sure you like and subscribe. Hit the bell icon to get notified. Leave a comment. I'd love to hear from you, especially you got some old stories. That's going to be it for me. Sasquatch Prospector out.